Hey guys, welcome. Today's class, as advertised in the title, will focus on healthy hips. If you've practiced with me before, you might know I'm a big fan of working the whole circumference of the hips in a way that creates both strength and mobility within the hip joint. While things like pigeon pose and those big, long, deep hip stretches can feel really good, and they can be good on one aspect, they're only like a tiny little sliver of what we need to create that whole healthy hip joint, to maintain the range of motion, the mobility of the hip joint, and to have some strength. Because sometimes the tightness actually comes from a little bit of weakness within the muscle as well. So we'll work all of that today. It'll be nice to have some props. If you have blocks, grab them, a blanket for our seated poses. And then if you have a tennis ball or anything like it, a racquetball, a cross ball, you have a myofascial release ball, great. And if you don't, no worries. We're just going to use it for this first little thing, and you can do it without that as well. Okay, so let's start lying down on our backs. Have your whatever you've got kind of ball. And then as you lie down, bend your knees. Take your feet about hip width apart. Okay, and we're going to slide the ball up underneath the hip. So you can feel even right where that your sacrum, that triangular bone at the base of the spine, and that crest of your hip meet. I like to start about there, up in the corner. That's right around our SI joint. But really, any place that feels good is going to be effective, and we'll move it around a little bit. Okay, so then just let the weight of your hip settle. Maybe be able to feel now like a little self massage from the ball. And then we're just going to take a half butterfly action with the leg. And so just take a nice deep breath in. And then as you exhale, open your right knee out to the side. And that might be where you feel a little like, ooh, sensation. Slowly close back together. Good. Take a couple like that. Go slow enough that you can really feel what's happening along the way. And then just start to match that, your breath and your movement together. Okay, and then the next time you come back up, you can just slide it down an inch or two or out to the side. We'll just move the tennis ball or whatever you've got around a little bit. And if you don't have the tennis ball, you can still do this half butterfly action with the leg. And it's a great way to get the mobility working through the hip joint. We talk about it sometimes almost like we want to get that synovial fluid, which is like the WD-40 for our joints. Movement's a great way to do that. Probably why next time you come up, find a new spot. When you wake up in the morning, things feel a little bit stiffer, creakier because we haven't moved. We haven't gotten the fluid moving within the joints. Like I can feel that's a really good spot. This is a really simple tool you can use at home, right? Just even for a few minutes if the hips are feeling a little out of balance. Okay, try one more spot. Or if you have landed on one that's really good and you want to stay there, do that. Right? Sometimes I can do this at night for like 20 minutes and just go back and forth between sides. Okay, and then come on back up and just switch sides. So take whatever you've got, slide it up underneath your left glutes. And if you can find that, sometimes just tracing right along the edge of the bone there at the sacrum, you can find a good place to start. And then when you're ready, start to move with your breath. Exhale to open, inhale to close, slow breath, slow movement. And so if you can visualize, if you're a visual person, where the spine ends at the sacrum, it's flat, kind of triangular shaped bone, and then the two iliac crests, the bones of the hip, make like an arc out from there. Okay, find a new spot next time you come up. And that place where the iliac crest and the sacrum meet is your sacroiliac joint or your SI joint, which we hear a lot about. Can, in some people, be a little problematic. We have a lot of nerves that run through this area. So we get into sciatica. Okay, new spot. I know I could stay here forever. You can always pause, hang out a little bit longer. We're just thinking about tucking this away to have to do when you need a little bit more space within the hip. Okay, maybe one more spot. Oh, there's a good spot on this side. And so when we think about hip opening poses, often what we think about is stuff like pigeon pose, right? Figure fours, and they are, and that's great. But that's getting just this one outer portion of the hip. Okay, when you're done with that one, you can release, roll what you've got off to the side, let that go, and then bring both knees into your chest. Take your hands to your kneecaps and then just make some big circles out wide, away, apart. Again, go slowly enough so you can feel. Right? Slowing down the movement, I think, actually gives us more awareness, more control, reverse directions. And so we can really pay attention to what's happening in the different places along the hip joint, right? The whole pelvis, sometimes side to side. Okay, and then keep your left knee in, stretch your right leg long on your mat. Keep your heel down, flex both feet. And then with your left knee, just move an inch or two side to side. Doesn't have to be a big movement. It just starts to massage on the front of the hip, right? So hip flexors, that's what's on the front. It's what bends your knee, brings it up towards your chest when you're standing. So hiking, biking, all of those things. Okay, and then come back to center. Keep your right leg strong, and then just hover your right heel an inch or two off the mat. And then you can feel now the front of the hip flexor on your right side turn on. Okay, lower back down. And then just take a couple little pulses like that. Lift up just an inch or two and back down. And then we're starting to ask the front of the hip flexors to engage, to turn on. Hip flexors can also be a big culprit with low back strain and issues if they are weak and tight. And it affects that front to back action connectedness of the pelvis. Okay, lift one more, hold for a breath. And then release your right heel back down, slide it in, switch sides. So left leg out, flex your feet, and then give your right thigh a little bit more squeeze in towards your belly. And then just a little bit side to side. Again, it might just be a couple few inches in either direction. And notice what you feel right across the front of your hip. This is one also if you sit a lot. Psoas can get shortened a little bit just from that constant flexion of the legs. Okay, back to center. Keep both feet flexed. Hover your left heel off the mat. You can even feel into the front of your left hip. Feel that strength of the muscle as it turns on and then release. Feel it let go. And then just pulse a couple times, nice and slow with your breath. Inhale to lift. Exhale, heel down. And as we work through today, just like with all of our practices, but I find especially in the hips, to notice what might not be in balance, side to side, that's not uncommon. And then one more time, lift your heel, take a breath. Hello, hip flexors. Good, and then all the way down, bring your left knee in, take a rock side to side. And then take your hands behind your thighs, roll forward. We'll come to tabletop, so whatever works best, find your way to hands and knees. And once you get there, just set up a clear foundation so your hips are over your knees, shoulders over your wrists, spread wide through your fingers, and then start to move through a couple rounds of cat-cow. And as you move here, just focus on that action of the pelvis. Right? As it tilts forward, tilts back. And just feel into that full range of motion. And wherever you're at, take one more full round. And find your way back to center. And find some tone through your low belly as you lift up and in. And then hug your outer waistline in for support. So there's a lot of support as we move into some work through the pelvis. And then from here, we'll come back to that half butterfly action. So different orientation, you might feel different things engage, turn on. And stay rooted through your hands for support. And if your inhale, open your knee out to the side, half butterfly. Exhale, close back together. And go slowly with your breath. Inhale, open. Exhale, close. If it feels like you're leaning all the way into your left knee, try to come back to center. Inhale, open. You're probably going to move that way a little bit, but you don't want to be leaning all the way over. Good. With your breath. And close. Good. Take one more out to the side, pause, and then make some big, slow circles with your knee and your hip. You might feel some places where the range of motion is really fluid. Sometimes it feels like there's a little hiccup in there. Go both directions. And think about it like the lubrication of the joint as we get the fluid moving within the joint capsule. Good. Both knees down and then switch sides, right? So inhale, left knee out to the side. Exhale, close together. And wherever your breath is, just follow that. It might be different from my cues. That's fine. Just go slow enough. You can really feel things as they start to engage, what's working. And out to the side, and then again, a couple big circles. And go both directions. Good. Come back to center, both knees down. Walk your hands forward a couple inches, stretch back, down dog. Good. And I invite you in down dog instead of movement just to find stillness here to begin. Right, root through your hands, send your hips up and back. You may have a bend in your knees if that feels better for hamstrings and glutes here. But start to press your heels towards your mat. And so we think about the full circumference of the hips, but it's also really hard to just isolate that. Anything that attaches along the pelvis, which is a lot, is going to affect that too. Particularly think about hamstrings, quads, adductors, as those get maybe tight or weak. And they're going to change the orientation of how the pelvis sits. And so look a little bit into things like hamstrings and quads to keep some space there for full healthy hips. Okay, with your next exhale, step your right foot forward. Bring your right knee down to your mat. Okay, and then bring your hands to your right thigh, Anjaneyasana. You can always take right foot out a little wider if that feels better for support, or pad your left knee if you want something there. Okay, back your hips out enough so that your left hip is over your left knee. And then squeeze your inner legs towards one another. Zip up through your low belly for support. Take a full breath in, lengthen up through your spine. And then nice and slow with your exhale, just let your hips start to shift forward. Good. Inhale back out. Nice. With your breath, slide forward. And just notice what you feel in the front of your left hip. Inhale, come on back. Good. Come forward. So we're just slowly, almost like flossing of the muscles on the front, asking those to create a little space, get a little heat moving. Right? Different things for different days. Sometimes the long holds feel good. Sometimes it feels nice to ease in with a little bit of movement. Great. And then the next time you come forward, and that might be an inch, that might be a little further forward, just make sure you still have the support of your legs in your belly. So we're not just hanging out on the front of the joint. Good. Take a full breath in, reach out through your arms, root down through your legs, and keep the inner legs squeezing in towards one another. Great. Next, exhale, hands down to your mat. Lift your back knee, low lunge. Here's a great place if you want support of blocks for a little bit more height. And sometimes the arms just don't feel long enough to get there. Okay, roll your left inner thigh up. Keep the legs strong. And then lengthen out through the top of your head. Take a full breath in. And then with your exhale, straighten your front leg to or towards straight. So you're in this extended pyramid pose, still up on the ball of your back foot. Keep the strength of inner legs. May even feel good to draw your outer right hip back a little bit, especially if that feels like it's pulling forward. Right, so as we just said, that space on the hamstrings can affect the health and right, how the pelvis is situated. And just take a moment, allow a little space there. As you press down from hips to feet, squeeze kneecaps up so that hamstrings feel supported. Good, one more breath in. And then as you exhale, you can take a little bend into your front knee, plant your hands, step back, down dog. Full breath in, full breath out. One more inhale here. And then exhale, step your left foot through. You can always grab your ankle, help it along. Bring your right knee down to your mat. And then bring both hands up to your front thigh. Okay, back out a little bit to start with. Right, squeeze your front heel towards your back knee. Right, draw your outer left hip back. And then zip up through your low belly to support your pelvis. Okay, take a breath in. And then exhale, let your hips slide forward. Ooh, notice what you notice on this side. And then back out. Good, with your breath. And back out. And you don't have to come all the way to what it feels like your full range of motion is. We're just starting to warm things up. Right, sometimes we can get further in the pose, further, quote unquote, but there's not stability and support around that. And sometimes in the long run, our hips aren't happy with that full range of motion, but with no strength, right? Without the support at that end range. Okay, next time you come forward, maybe just a little bit, listen, and you may even come to that range of motion and back out a little bit. And then feel, where can I hug in and support and stabilize around that? Both arms up, inhale. Good, take a couple breaths, root down into your foundation. Lift up through your arms and stay supported through the low belly. And next, exhale, hands down, blocks or mat. Lift your back knee, low lunge. Okay. And then just feel where the hips are, right? Especially if one's feeling a little bit shortened or tighter. The left hip might want to pull forward, draw back. Right. Roll your right inner thigh up towards the ceiling. That might help to set the pelvis as well. Take a full breath in. And then exhale, straighten or towards straight with your front leg and fold in. Right. Blocks, hands to mat, whatever feels right. Keep strong and supported as you hug in. And as you press down, squeeze kneecaps up and let your upper body soften. Take a couple full breaths. Right. And so, yeah, we talk about space in the hamstrings. Where do you feel it? Is it more in the middle, the belly of the muscle? Is it at the attachment? Right up at the crease of your backside or down by your knee? And start to become aware and get specific. And then take a little bend into your front knee, big step forward to the front of your mat. Take your feet out a little wider, and then bend your knees, settle down to squat malasana. So a couple great things you can do here for support. You can sit up on a block or two. That can be lovely. For some of us, for many of us, the heels lift here in Malasana because of the length of, well, likely the Achilles, but sometimes different things. So a blanket underneath your heels can be a really nice way to find some support. Okay, and then take a look at your feet and your knees. Right, so this pose is often cued as turning the feet out, but really just depends on range of motion of your hips. What you're looking for is for the center of your knee to track down the center of your foot. So that might mean turning way out. That might mean more straightforward. Bring your hands together at your heart. Squeeze your legs. Right, so inner legs to outer arms and then lift your chest up. Take a breath or two. And so keeping that inner leg strength for support and press down into your feet. So it doesn't feel like you're just collapsing into the pose, that there's support there. Good, one more full breath. And then release your hands, lift your hips. Bring your feet so they're about hip width apart. As you press down into your feet, inhale, lift and lengthen halfway. Get a little space back in the spine. Exhale, fold. Again, you can have bent knees or straight legs. Press into your feet, inhale, lift and lengthen. Exhale, fold. Okay, one more like that. Lengthen forward, inhale. And then from here, bring your hands to your hips, root into your feet, come all the way up. Exhale, bring hands together at your heart. Okay, let's move into a little balance. It's going to work both front and side of the hip. Okay, so start with your feet together. Find a focus point for your eye, somewhere on the wall in front of you, and start with your hands together at your heart. Stand into your left leg, and then bring your right knee up, flex your foot. Right? So as soon as we do that, it activates the front of the hip. Right? The flexion of the hip is when we shorten at the front, bring the knee up, thigh towards the chest. And so just feel what it feels like to turn that on. And then press down into your left foot, stand a little bit taller. Take a full breath in. And then as you exhale, stretch your right leg back, warrior three, sweep your arms back by your sides, or you can keep them in prayer. Okay, inhale, come back, stand up, bring your knee up. So we go back and forth between open and closed at the front of the hip. Send it back, exhale. Stand all the way up. Inhale, bring knee up, keep your foot flexed. And exhale, press back. Good, one more, come on up, knee up, flex foot. And then exhale, press back, this time pause. And roll your inner right thigh up. And you can be leg just lifted if that feels better for balance, or a little bit higher. And then extend out through your heel and the crown of your head. Full breath in. As you exhale, both feet down to your mat, hands to heart, take a breath. Okay, second side, stand into your right. Bring your left leg up. And see if you can start to work towards, just in that direction, knee and hip in line, and then hip and ankle in line. So it's 90-degree angles at the joints. You root down through your right foot, stand tall. You can feel the front of the left hip working. Take a breath in. And then exhale, go slowly, press it back. It might be a little, you might come parallel to the mat, whatever works. Stand up, inhale. Press back, exhale. Move with your breath. Right, we get the added benefit too here. We're working that strength of the outer right hip to stabilize in the balance, which it does whenever we work in balance poses. Good, come on back up. And then one more time, press back. You can keep hands to heart or sweep your arms back. Just take a moment to level through the pelvis here. So usually the left hip's going to come up because it makes it easier. So roll your inner left thigh up, keep your foot flexed, tone your belly, and lengthen. Next, exhale, both feet down to your mat, hands to heart. Take a breath. Good. Stand up at the front of your mat if you're not already. Both arms up, inhale. Hinge, fold forward, exhale. Lift halfway, take a breath in. Exhale, fold, step your right foot back, and then pivot your feet to the long end of your mat. So you're in wide-legged forward fold. Line up your feet so they're parallel to one another, and the outer edges of your feet line up with the front and back of your mat. And just let your upper body hinge and fold forward. You could grab blocks. You can walk your hands back, whatever is most comfortable here for your upper body. You might have a little bend in your knees or your legs working towards straight. And as you start to settle in here, press down strongly from hips to feet. And then feel like you could zip from the inner arch all the way up the inseam of the leg. And so adductors also attach to the pelvis and can affect how our pelvis sits and is situated, side to side, front to back. The other thing to notice here is if you're leaning all the weight back into your heels, try and shift a little bit forward to the balls of your feet. With really strong legs, let your upper body get heavy and just fold in for a moment. And then last thing here, squeeze your kneecaps up towards your thighs. So get the quads on board and see what that feels like. Okay, keep strong legs, bring hands to hips, press into your feet. Inhale, come all the way up. Ooh, good work. Left toes forward. Slide your right heel back just an inch or two, and then bend your front knee. Bring your arms out wide, warrior two. And if you need to adjust the length of your stance front to back, if it's not quite right from that first pose, do that. So that your front knee's over your ankle. Good. And you have a nice long stance front to back that feels stable, effective. Right. But you can still get the strength here to support. So you squeeze your heels into center. Good. And then settle down. Start to get a little stability through the front thigh. Okay, next inhale, straighten your front leg. Exhale, hinge, reach forward, triangle pose. It's a great place also for a block or hand to shin for a little bit more support. Okay, and then I'm going to invite you to focus on the rotation of the hips here. So roll your right, your back inner thigh back, like you're rolling it towards the wall behind you. It feel like the butt sticks out a little bit, that's fine. And then roll your left, your front inner thigh up towards the ceiling. And so we get the rotation of the hips in opposite directions, internal and external rotation. A great way to create some mobility in the hips. But then you keep the squeezing of the heels in, rooting down through your feet. So there's a lot of strength and support around that. Okay, keep that press into your feet. Inhale, come all the way up. Pivot your feet to the long end of your mat again. This time, turn toes out, heels in, bend your knees, goddess squat. Just like Malasana, you want to line up center of knees with center of feet. Right, so that's going to determine how far in or out you turn your hips. There's no right answer, it's whatever works for your body. Right, and then enough bend that it feels effective. Okay, a little bit more engagement on the outer hip. So feel like you could squeeze your outer knee towards your outer hip, like you would shorten those 2 points together until it feels outer hip turns on, inner thigh lengthens. Breathe, strong work in the legs. Okay, next inhale, stand all the way up. Good, turn your right toes back, slide your left heel back. Arms out wide, inhale. Bend your front knee, warrior two, exhale. Same thing, if you want, change stance a little bit. And our feet don't always land just where we need them to. Squeeze your heels in. Right, and then just like we did in that triangle pose, now roll your left inner thigh in and back. Roll your right inner thigh up towards the ceiling. And just feel that different rotation of the hips. Keep that inhale, straighten your front leg. Exhale, hinge forward, come down, triangle pose, second side. Hug in, root down. And the pelvis is pretty fascinating how it can move many different directions and independent of each other, side to side, can rotate differently side to side. So we want to maintain all of those ranges of motion, that mobility, while also maintaining strength. Good. Come all the way up. Inhale, pivot your toes forward, reach both arms up. Take a full breath in. And then exhale, hinge, fold forward. Lift halfway, inhale. Fold, exhale. Inhale, come all the way up, sweep up. Exhale, hands together at your heart. Okay, and then one more time, toes out, heels in. Bend your knees to squat. You can keep your hands in prayer. Line up feet and knees. Squeeze outer knee towards outer hip. As you sit low but lift your chest. We're just going to find a little movement with this one. So as you inhale, press down into your heel, stand all the way up, reach up. Exhale, slow. So resist heels pulling together, squeeze together as you sit back down. Good. Up, inhale. Hands to heart slowly, like you're moving through resistance, bend knees, squat. Okay, one more, reach up, straighten. And then hands to heart, bend knees. Nice work. This time as you reach up, pivot your toes forward. Exhale, fold. Walk your hands to the front of your mat. Step back, down dog. Good. Take a full round of breath. And with your next exhale, step your right foot forward. And then walk your right foot to the middle of your mat. Okay, this is going to be like pigeon, but not quite pigeon. Okay, with your foot in the middle of your mat, roll onto the outer edge of your front foot. And so you're on the pinky edge of your foot. And then take your hands out a little wider. So here's a great thing. You can always bring your back knee down for this. It's going to give you a little bit more support. Right? It's a great variation some days. Right? Or back leg lifted. And then squeeze your front heel towards your back toes. And either stay right here. So your knees out to the side in that general shape of pigeon, but not down on the ground. Or maybe start to bend your elbows a little bit. Move the center of your chest towards your big toe. Take a couple of breaths. And then come back up. Walk your hands back to center. From here, stretch your right leg up and back, three-legged dog. And then bend your knee, open your hip. And so now we get that space again in the front of the hip flexors. Press the sole of your foot back. And come back, both legs down, down dog. Inhale here. Exhale, step your left foot all the way through. Okay, and then again, walk your left foot to the middle of your mat. Roll up so you're on the outer edge of your front foot. So you can see kind of that general shape of pigeon, but lifted. Back knee up or back knee down for a little bit more support. Squeeze your inner legs. Can I take your hands out a little wider too, or even hands to blocks is nice here. Okay, and then you're going to stay upright here, or bend your elbows out to the sides and start to lower the center of your chest down. As you do that, press through the pinky edge of your front foot You're getting that strength all the way up through the outer hip. Right, so while it looks like pigeon, it's way more strengthening than opening like regular pigeon is. Good, come on back up. Walk your hands back in, stretch back, three-legged dog, left leg high, and then bend your knee, open your hip. And as you root through your hands, press the sole of your foot back. And come back to center, both feet down. Take a breath in, child's pose, exhale. Take a couple of breaths. Right, let your knees come out nice and wide. And allow your hips to settle back towards your heels. And side forward, tabletop. Okay, grab your block, or you might even want a couple blocks for this one. And so you're going to do the opposite now here, knees together and feet out a little bit wider. Virasana hero's pose. Take your hands back behind your knees and then just iron the flesh back. Right, so here's where, for many of us, a block in between the heels is going to be really nice for support. Or two blocks. If you can comfortably sit in between the heels for this one, great, go for it. For some of us, that's just a little bit too much on the knees. And if this in general is too much on knees, you can take a cross-legged seat for a moment. You could slide a blanket behind your knees, just some options for support. Okay, and then take a hand to your left thigh, roll to your right a little bit, and lift the thigh, roll it in, right? So inner thigh towards the mat. And then do the same on the right side. So you're going to shift to your left, roll the thigh in, and then sit back down. Okay, press through the tops of your feet, anchor through your sitting bones, and sit tall. So this pose gets the internal rotation of the thighs, which isn't an action that we always do, especially if we're focused a lot on hip openers like figure four shape, right? That's the opposite. It gets the external rotation of the hip joint. Right? So it's not a bad thing. I'm a big fan of everything in balance. So if we're doing one, we should do the other. If we're working the front, we should work the back. If we're opening, we should also be strengthening so that you're getting that full supported work throughout the hips and the pelvis. Okay, take a couple more breaths here. And then slide forward off of your support. You can stretch a leg back, open up your knees, do both sides. Good. And then come to sit in the middle of your mat. Stretch your legs out in front. So you just want to have some space behind you. Okay, from here, you're going to have two options, again, just depending on mobility of knees and ankles, mostly sometimes hips, but those seem to be the places that stop us. So you're either going to take the sole of your foot, right foot, to your inner left leg, right? Or you're going to bend your right knee back and come to the top of your foot. You could always slide a blanket underneath your foot or your ankle. That can be really nice for support here too. Right, so now again, we're getting that rotation of the thigh in, right? Unless you're doing leg out to the side, a little different, and that's okay. Either way, we're getting some work through the hip there. And then you can start to walk your hands back, lift your hips, lengthen your tailbone, and then set your hips back down. And then decide, say like this might be plenty right here, or you start to work down a little bit more, maybe to your forearms. If you have a lot of range of motion here, you want to lie all the way back, go for it. If that sounds ridiculous to you, don't do it. Okay, but wherever you're at, a little bit more engagement through the right foot. Right? So if your sole of the foot to the leg, push those 2 points together, hug in. If your top of the right foot down, press into the top of your foot and lengthen out through your right knee. Right? Hip flexors, quadriceps, health of the knee. Right? We can try and isolate one area, but it's all connected. Okay, come on back up. Unwind. Switch sides. So either sole of your foot in or top of your foot back. Right, so top of the foot down, heel in by your hip. And again, maybe a blanket, even sometimes just for cushion or underneath your ankle for a little support. Play with what feels good there. I'm going to start to walk back. Lift your hips a little bit and lengthen your tailbone. That just gives you some space in your low back. Okay, and you might stay pretty upright here. Come to forearms. Come all the way back. Block under your head. All sorts of variations. And then either press foot and leg and inner thigh into one another, or press the top of your left foot down and lengthen out through your knee. And then wherever you're at, just take a couple breaths and notice. Right, so the little things we can do to engage and support the muscle even as we're opening it. Such a great balance of the two. Okay, come all the way back up. Unwind, shake it out a little. And then if you like to sit up on a blanket for seated poses, which I highly recommend really for the health of our hips. Sometimes the edge of a throw pillow works really well too. And the reason being, right, is that sometimes when we sit, the back rounds. But if you can lift the hips a little bit and maintain some length through your spine, through your low back. Okay. After that, legs out in front, right up on the edge of your blanket or support, and then stack your left knee on top of your right or in that general direction. It might be lifted a little higher. Right? Find the right place for you. And then you might say, this is great, I'm going to stay right here, this is plenty. Or you'll tuck your right foot back, Gomukhasana, cow face pose. Wherever you're at, flex your feet and press down through the outer edges of your feet or your heel, whatever is connected to the mat. Right, so that's how we're going to get that support and engagement, and then squeeze your inner legs in. Right, like I already get some really good sensation here, so you could stay right here. Like this is great. Right, or you can start to walk your hands forward and fold in. And notice where the sensation says that's good. And when you get there, can you still engage? Right, to press through your feet and hug your legs in so that even in the length, there's strength. And if that doesn't feel like a good option, right, if you can't quite get that strength, back out a little. Right, so we're not just hanging out at that end range of motion with no support. I think those are the things that sometimes feel really good in the moment, but can, not for everyone, can cause a little strain on the attachments over time. Sometimes what our 24-year-old bodies feel is okay, our 50 or 60 or 70-year-old bodies. You might want to thank the younger ones for taking that time for support. Right, that it's not just about the range of motion. Good. Back out, unwind, stretch your legs out in front again, take a breath. And then switch sides, right knee on top. Right? And you can take a different variation side to side. It probably feels different side to side. Stay there or tuck your foot back. Flex your feet, press down, squeeze your inner legs together. And then lengthen up through your spine. You can even do, we should have done this on the first side, that same little adjustment here. Take your hand to your right thigh, roll it in. Sometimes that even helps to get the sitting bone, the right sitting bone, to anchor a little bit more. Okay, here, or fold forward. And sometimes fold forward is like a half an inch. For some people, it's belly a little bit further forward. But in the length, can you still strengthen? Feet flexed, root down, hug in. So that there's this sensation of the muscles hugging into the bone, even as you're creating some space. Good. Couple more breaths. And then walk yourself back up, unwind. We're going to come back to lying down, grab your block. And then this time, go ahead and set up for supported bridge. I would recommend lower middle setting just for where we're going to go. And as you set it up, just be sure that your block is really under your hips, your glutes, right, the meat of your bum, and not up into your low back. Okay, let your head rest back and shoulders. Even here now, we start to create a little bit of space in the front of the hip while we support the back. So you can stay just like this, or start to stretch your legs out towards straight. They might come all the way, they might not. But just like we've been doing, I'm going to ask you is to keep your legs active here. So flex your feet, press your heels down, and squeeze your kneecaps up towards your thighs. And then just allow that range of motion to open up on the front of the hip. And so if you do sit a lot, this kind of gives us that alternate for it, the remedy for it. So we create space in front of the hips instead of the compression. Even the things that we do that are really active and healthy and good for us, right? Hiking, biking, anything that gets the hip flexion is really good, but it, can create different patterns on the hips over time. So take just a few more breaths here. And then just one at a time, start to slide your feet back. Lift your hips, slide the block out. Take your feet wide, let your knees rest together, constructive rest pose. And just notice how they feel. What feels a little more spacious? What feels like it worked, right? Engaged, got turned on. And then draw your knees in towards your chest. Give a little squeeze of thighs in towards belly, forehead to knees. Take a full breath in. And then exhale, release, let it go, Shavasana. You can come back to that constructive rest pose if that felt good. Stretch legs all the way out, or even slide some support underneath your knees. And take your legs out wide enough. It feels like they can just relax. Close your eyes or soften your gaze. And just give yourself these last couple moments to allow all that you did to really settle in. And so that we create that new muscle memory for ways to move, to engage, to feel really integrated through the hips. And to enjoy the rest after the work that they did. If you have longer to stay and rest, please do. If you are ready to come out with your next inhale, take a full stretch, reach your arms up overhead, lengthen out through your legs, and then draw your knees in towards your chest. Roll to your side. Press all the way up to sitting. Bring your hands together at your heart. Sit tall. Thank you so much for taking the time to share the practice today. Namaste.